Hello, I'm Jonathan Chevalier, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's Charity Digital News webinar. This is the third in our series which we're delivering this month in collaboration with Microsoft. If you joined us before, it's great to have you back. And if it's your first webinar with us, then I hope it's the first of many. I'm here today in the Microsoft office in London, so change of venue from last week, and I've got Pedro and Harry as our presenters today. Before we move into the core subject of today, which is managing volunteer and donor information using CRM software, I'll say a few words about Tech Trust. So what are Tech Trust and Charity Digital News? Well, we're a charity that's focused on helping other charities to maximise their impact through the use of technology. And that's the reason why we run these webinars, free of charge, as a way of raising the skill levels across the charity sector. All the sessions are standalone, so you can join any one that you like, or you can join all of them if that's of interest to you as well. We cover a really wide range of topics, so things like social media, cybersecurity, digital leadership, as well as this month where the focus is on Microsoft skills. In terms of the logistics of today's session, if you're joining a little bit late, can I suggest you hit the live button in the bottom left of your screen? So that'll bring you live into the webinar rather than following a recording that'll be maybe lagging by a number of minutes. And if you've got any questions, you can actually raise those at any point in time by clicking on the question mark button on your screen. If you're in a browser, that'll be a purple button, which is at the bottom right of your screen. And if you're using a mobile device, it'll be a white button at the top right of your screen. And if you're on the Teams desktop, you might not be able to see the question mark. So you can actually rectify that by pressing the Control and Plus button to modify your Zoom settings. A couple of other words about Tech Trust. So as well as Charity Digital News, other things we do, we run TT Exchange, which gives access to discounted and donated technology. So through that, you can get access to some great solutions and applications at much lower cost than other businesses. We run TT Mail, which is a white labeled service using the .mailer technology. So if you maybe find MailChimp a little bit hard to get to grips with or frustrating, then you'd really love the TT Mail service. And we also run Charity Digital Jobs, which does what it says on the label, really, a charity job site for people with digital skills. So in terms of today's webinar, I've already introduced how to raise questions. We will be making a recording of this webinar available after the event. We typically do that within a week. And if you look on our website, you'll already see the first of the Microsoft Skills sessions is up, and the next one's due to go up very shortly as well. So that's all I'd like to say by way of lead in. So I'll hand now to Harry Morgan, who will introduce us to the very important area of managing volunteer and donor information using CRM.
Thank you for the intro, Jonathan. Excited to be here with you and Charity Digital News for our third webinar. Thanks everybody for joining us today. For those of you who have joined in previously, you will notice that I am not Eve Joseph. In fact, I'm Harry Morgan, and I work with Eve as our Philanthropies Programme Manager. And I am here to welcome you all to our third in the series of this Digital Skills webinar. Thanks everybody for joining me today. For those of you who have joined us previously, you will notice that I'm not Eve Joseph, just repeating that in case you didn't hear it the first time. My name's Harry Morgan and I work with Eve as our Philanthropies Programme Manager, here to welcome you all to our third in the series of the Digital Skills webinars. So a bit about us. This picture here is our Charity Digital Champions volunteer team, as many of you may have seen before, who are part of our wider Microsoft Social Impact team. And we are here with a mission to create opportunities for our talented employees to share expertise with charities, young people, schools and communities. And just a fresh reminder and a bit of new information for those of you who haven't been with us before. But as many of you would have seen, our mission at the company is to empower every person and every organisation on the planet to achieve more. And that mission there is at the heart of everything we do here to bring these digital skills webinars to life and other initiatives that we deliver. So at Microsoft, we believe technology is a powerful force for improving people's lives, but we know this can only happen when everyone has access to it with this advancement, and we don't want to leave anybody behind. We believe that technology can help you in a number of areas within your charity. Day to day, everybody in the charity sector are helping to solve some of the most pressing societal issues across the UK and supporting people for supporting everybody from all walks of life. Where we fit in is that at Microsoft, we see ourselves as being able to offer you a platform technologically to help you do your best work and get on focusing on these issues. So last week, Eve showed a couple of slides about digital maturity and the impact that it can actually have on the charities in terms of looking at the types of diversity and inclusion and those kind of things. And I just put those slides back up to look at and how charities that are more digitally mature are 28% more likely to report an increasing funding than those who aren't. This week, we've got a bit of a change from there. So we looked at the diversity and inclusion within the charity culture, but this time we're looking at how organizations may improve digital skills to embrace a CRM system. And I just wanted to share some insights into how this getting to grips with this type of technology might help your own charity. So two areas for me spring to mind. The first is that a simple yet professional CRM system can absolutely help connecting beneficiaries with program delivery. Many charities are now being asked to track the outcomes and impact of program delivery with specific beneficiaries. And moving this away from Excel spreadsheets or complex reporting procedures could really help improve analysis here. So the second point as well is also volunteer coordination. And we're looking at how that we'll hear from shortly can help charities optimize volunteer management, capturing preferences, skills, certifications, availability, schedules, projects, and so much more. Now, I know our host for today, Pedro, is going to go into a lot more detail on this. So please do get prepared with your questions so that we can move through the webinar and really make this an interactive experience, as I know that we are looking to answer those questions after Pedro has given his presentation. But just up before I hand over to Pedro, I just wanted to share a bit of inspiration here that you might want to check out the case study here with the link below, aka.ms/cats-protection, as they've got some really good and interesting information as to how they use CRM systems for modern document storage and intranet creation. Excuse me. So without further ado, I'll just leave that on for a couple more seconds, but I'm now going to hand over to Pedro to get cracking with our topic for today.
Thank you, Harry. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming to this or for joining this webinar. My name is Pedro. I'm an ADM at Microsoft. That pretty much means that I spend my day-to-day helping people develop better software faster than they currently do. And among a few of the technologies that I cover, I also cover dynamic CRM. I think we'll be talking about CRM in a very generic way. I would just like to leave the note here that if for some reason I mentioned dynamic CRM, that's just a fault of the trade, but tend to think of it as a generic CRM approach. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about one of the areas that charities usually focus, which is on fundraising, okay? So this is arguably an activity that will allow you to do everything else that you, all the good things that you need to do. And a good fundraising strategy and the appropriate choice of approach and timing are essential to make sure that you are successful when fundraising so that you are enabled to do all the good things after that. I want to start this with a personal story from a couple of years ago. I used to help this, so I come from Portugal, and a couple of years ago, I used to help a charity in Portugal called Bianca, and they would take care of abandoned animals, giving them food, medical attention, and trying to get them adopted. The problem that they had was that after a while, they continuously spammed me with requests for donation. I pretty much get the same email every week, maybe with different pictures of different animals, but there wasn't really an effort from their part to make me feel like I was special, that I was involved. I just get this really, I don't know, maybe standardized email that everybody was received. So in that case, because of that, I got slightly donor tired, as I call it, and I ended up stopping my contributions to that charity. And that's one of the things that Dynamic CRM allows you to do. So they allow you to track how your campaigns are working. They allow you to know your donors a little bit better. They allow you to make sure that whatever you do, you don't keep, and I will hesitate in saying this word, but I will say it anyway, you don't keep spamming the same person every week with the same message. Okay, Dynamic CRM actually helps you to diversify and to find different ways and eventually track which ways, to help you to track which ways work best when you're trying to raise money to do the good things that you do. So the first step to improve your fundraising is knowing your donors. So you need to be aware that your target audience might be a diversified audience. Maybe in the beginning you don't really know who your targets are going to be, but Dynamic CRM allows you to do that. Okay, so initially CRM systems were used by big companies to manage the relationship that they had with their customers, allowing them to know them better, knowing which campaigns work better for them, knowing how to make every customer feel special. And there's no reason why a charity shouldn't think about it or going about it in pretty much the same way. So people who donate, and I speak mostly from personal experience, tend to like to feel like I'm being given a personalized treatment. I like to feel special. I like to feel connected to the organization that I'm donating to. But also, if you have something like a Dynamic CRM, you can understand what's my potential as donor. Okay, it's not the same thing for you to be fundraising with someone who can contribute maybe £10 a week, or eventually talking to someone who's a millionaire and can give a huge amount of money in one go. So a CRM allows you to look at your customers, and instead of seeing, or looking at your donors, and instead of seeing a huge amount or a huge undifferentiated mass of constituents, it allows you to start to distinguish between them, understanding who they are, eventually realizing that campaigns of a certain kind work better with donors of a certain type, or maybe you should potentially figure out that the campaign A should target only those people who are between, I don't know, maybe 25 and 35, and the campaign B is better suited to work with another age range. The other thing that you need to be aware is you need to know about the giving rhythm. Some people like to donate maybe every month or every week. Some people donate once a year. Some people just donate whenever they can. And with Dynamics or with the CRM, you can totally be aware of the rhythm of donation of your constituents. The other thing that you can do, and I know if I'm not mistaken, I think this is a very recent change. So this allows you also to give your donors information about how you are spending the resources that they provide you. So if a specific donor donates for, I don't know, let's say that you're an organization that targets homelessness, and you're doing a campaign at this moment regarding people in London, you can keep your donors informed that the money that you raised from them was spent with ending homelessness in London. So as I said, we need to reduce waste when we are chasing for funds. A recent statistic shows that roughly 3.3% of the annual charity spending is on fund hunting, but there really isn't a very good idea of how much of those funds are spent wisely and how much of that money is spent in a non-productive or in a way that doesn't give you back the value for that money. Okay, so if you have something like a CRM, something that tracks, and it can be used to correlate campaign A, and you know that donor donor X gave as part of a campaign A, but didn't give as part of campaign B, you can start to realize which kinds of campaigns work for each kind of donor. I'm not saying that there might be a campaign that doesn't work. What I'm saying is with dynamic CRM, you can go much further than looking at something like this campaign doesn't work, and actually using the tools that you have at your at the tips of your hands, at the tips of your fingers, to realize that you might want to do differentiated campaigns to different kinds of constituents. It's not the same thing if you have someone that you could eventually approach on the street and ask for a donation, or someone who's willing to leave something in his or her will to you. You need to approach those people in a different way, and dynamic CRM enables you to search to do that. The other thing you can do, and even before you commit to maybe a larger spending on a larger campaign, with the CRM, you can do things like A/B testing. So do a small test run of your campaign, see if it works in the one way or if it works on the other, see which way tends to work best with your constituents, and then you can eventually expand that campaign to a larger audience. Another thing that you need to know is you need to know how you're spending your fundraising budget. It's quite easy for things to get out of control, and a tool like CRM allows you to not only get reports on your donor base, but also have an integrated and global view on your funding process and see how your costs are going, where you are spending your money. But not only that, you can also keep your constituents informed of the use that you're making of their money. That also brings them in. Sorry, that also makes them feel like they are part of it. It helps to bring them on board and feel more connected and related to the organization that they are donating to. The other thing that we need to do is provide for a better service. And that tends to happen by reducing waste or being more efficient when providing the services we provide. And to do that, we need to be able to reduce the time to serve, okay? So from identifying people in need to being able to manage our volunteer base, if that's the case, or eventually being able to identify and address problems a lot sooner, something like CRM allows you to reduce the time it takes for you to do the good things you do. So let's say that you might have a huge base of volunteers. Maybe sometimes you have too many volunteers for whatever's happening at the moment. Maybe at some other time you need more people and you just can't get them. With a tool like a CRM, you can keep track of all those people who apply to become volunteers and just manage them in such a way that you make sure that you have the right resources at the right time. On the other hand, it also, if you are potentially making work that involves having people as your beneficiaries, you can keep track of how many people you're helping, eventually getting early notice when you kind of realize that the number of people that you need to help will increase. CRM also helps you to uncover trends on maybe you need to help homeless people a little bit more in the winter, maybe you need to help them a little bit less in the summer. But the CRM, or a tool like a CRM, allows you to get insights into those kinds of information. The other thing you need to be aware is that we need to maximize the way we allocate our resources. not all the activities charities develop have the same impact. Not all the activities have the same results. Maybe some activities deliver more good than others. And when you're planning your activities for the year or for the semester, you need to make sure that you're allocating your budget not only in accordance to what your donors eventually asked for, but you also need to be aware that you will be spending more money on some activities than on the others, and you need to make sure that you make the resources go to the right place. Also, with the volunteers, you want to make sure that you will send more people when they are needed, and send eventually not so many people to activities that have less impact. All those things. All those are things that you can do with the CRM, because it just allows you to have a whole view of your activities. And finally, you can track how you use your resources. So you are at any point in time able to tell your constituents if you used the money to, I don't know, activity A or activity B, how was the money that they gave you spent, or any other donations. How many volunteers work in activity A, how many volunteers in activity B, what are the costs involved, and how you can be sure that the resources that were made available to you are used in the best possible way. A tool like a CRM allows you to, either through reportings or dashboards, always have a view of whatever it is that you're doing with the resources that you have at your hands. And finally, as part of the digital transformation, it's really important that we are able to transition fast. Okay, many organizations have things like Excel files as the base for their information. I'm sorry, or maybe they are still paper-based. And nowadays, tools like the CRMs help you to import all that information and make sure that you get to organize it in such a way that the way that you deal with information on the CRM is pretty much the same as you would deal with it in your previous format, but taking into account stuff like GDPR, which is, so I don't know if GDPR is on the scope for this, but it's the data protection regulation that's in force now. And amongst other things, it gives you the right to be forgotten. So if someone says, well, I want to be removed from your database, and you have your records on a bunch of sheets of paper, you're going to have a hard time doing it. And in tools like CRMs, you are eventually able to do it a lot faster. So they usually have tools like that make it really easy for you to import existing data, be it from Excel spreadsheets, maybe Access databases, maybe some other kind of files, I don't know, sheets of paper, post-it notes. Usually there are tools that allow you to import data in a very quick and a very efficient way. And a lot of CRMs also allow you to customize it in such a way that you can make it more adequate to your activities. Typically, some products or some customizations will need you to involve a partner, or to learn to upskill yourself to be able to do them, in the sense that typically some features involve software development knowledge. But many CRMs and many of the customizations that you can make are completely accessible to your average user. So let's say that you need to add a form, or add a field to a form, or you need to add some kind of process, a business process flow, or you need to make sure that field A doesn't appear in a specific report. Those are all changes that you can make without the need to have software development skills. They are usually quite quick to learn, those kinds of skills. But usually there's also a very lively and a very dynamic ecosystem of partners that you can leverage to tailor the CRM to your specific needs. And finally, because we have multiple devices at our disposal, nowadays CRMs don't just live on on laptops or desktops. You should be able to use your iPad or your phone or even some other web-connected device that will allow you to do the day-to-day operations. Some CRMs also have modules that really allow your field service workers to do things while they're on the road. It allows you to dispatch someone to a location if he or she really need to be there. It allows them to collect reports on site. Those are all features that you can get out of a CRM with some additional modules. I'd also like to show you. I would also like to show you a little view of the CRM. Let me see if I can get this to. I hope you are seeing my. So this is like I started this conversation by saying. So I used to work with Dynamics. So I'll be showing you Dynamics. I'm pretty sure there are other solutions that you can use. I'll just, for obvious reasons, will show you Dynamics. And my main idea here is to be able to show you the kind of information that you can have when you use the CRM. All the data that you see here is sample data, so we are not reaching on any kind of confidentiality. But this allows you to see, going back to our initial stage where we talked about knowing your donors, this allows you to see which one of your donors has pledged some amount of money. You can see that some households committed more than the others. You also have by type of commitment. It allows you to see for households and commitments, but also allows you to see something that, at least from my perspective, seems a little bit more interesting, which is this kind of charts that give you an idea of what you can expect and how your fundraising is going. Of course, all of this is supported by data that you can see. So if I press on this one, I can totally drill down. I can go and see what the individuals are doing. I can do it by household. Also, something that's very popular with more commercial, let's say, endeavors is related to the way that you track an opportunity. And so many companies start by creating the leads, then one which potentially would be maybe someone that you just met at a social event. That lead might then turn into an opportunity if you actually realize that that person is able to make a contribution. And then you do that whole process of getting the person to contribute in a more managed way. And eventually it will give you some insight of how that works. Other things that are interesting, so you can see your donor commitments. You can see how much they have pledged to give. You can have a view of what's the planned giving. So this allows you also to plan for the future. And you can also see your transactions. You can, of course, always see the details. So you can see how much, when, what's the original transaction, was it part of SAM campaign? That gives you further insight into what works and what doesn't work. You can also see grants, so dockets, your programs. And finally, you can also manage your volunteers, not only people who are actively volunteering at the moment, but you can also manage your applicants and eventually volunteer recruitment events. Finally, and I know I'm going through this slightly quickly, but I want us to have some time for some Q&A. We can manage your campaigns along with its objectives. And you can finally, really finally, look at the tasks and events and the documents that support our whole activity. So by all means, we have multiple dashboards, but this is, you can make them your own. It's really easy, just stuff like come here and create new and say, what do you want to see here? This is all customizations that don't need to be made by a software engineer or a software person. Anyone with a little bit of time can become proficient in doing their own customizations. So finally, making sure we have some time for Q&A. That's pretty much it from me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Pedro, for some really insightful information there about how to manage data using CRM systems. Before we head into Q&A, I thought I would again, as has been highlighted in previous webinars, share some further resources to help all eligible charities continue this conversation. As I at Microsoft and my colleague Eve often gets asked, what next, or how do I get more info? These links that you can see on your screen right now have lots of information on our donation program, discount offers for eligible charities, a useful white paper to help you understand some of the context around tech and charities. And also at the bottom, you can see there, it is our Microsoft help desk for any queries you might have around our technology offers. And just before we head into charities, head into questions and answers, excuse me. I just wanted to flag once again the Charity Digital Code. As many of you may have already come across this, it's a fab resource designed by many of the charity sector's thought leaders, including Small Charities Coalition, ACVO, the NCVO, the Charity Commission, and Tech Trust. There are 171 charity representatives involved, in fact. It's the UK's first digital code of practice for charities and has been created to provide practical advice on improving your charity's digital capabilities. It's well worth exploring, championing within your own organisation. For those who, it's a great link to go and share after this webinar for a bit of visibility and looking at how the charity sector are really taking digital by storm. And if you haven't got any information, just a quick Bing or Google search and you'll find all the necessary info. So what's coming up next? Well, sadly, we've got the fourth and final webinar in our series, but it is an absolute cracker, and it is all about teamwork and how we can bring people and workflows together to enable teamwork. We're going to be looking particularly into our Microsoft newest collaboration tool that combines workplace chat, meetings, file sharings, and also a new program that actually also collaborates and connects seamlessly to our favorite Office 365 applications. And that is on the 30th of April from 1 till 2, and there will be some correspondence coming out after that. I would also, just before we head on to the Q&A, it's worth mentioning that there will be a feedback form sent about this particular webinar, sent immediately after this webinar has concluded. And we really would appreciate everybody taking a couple of minutes to fill in that feedback form. We really do read every single comment, every piece of feedback, and try and act on every bit of feedback that we're given. So if you've got a couple of minutes to give your thoughts, we really would appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar on the 30th of April. So without further ado, Jonathan, have we got any questions?
Yes, we certainly have. We've got plenty of questions. And if anybody's forgotten how to raise a question, I'll just mention that. So there'll be a question mark button on your screen. If you're on a browser, it'll be a purple question mark button at the bottom right. And if you're on a mobile device, it'll be a white button at the top right. But let's cut into the questions now. It's a really practical one, this, but really important question as well, I think. Pedro, what would be your advice for the first steps that a charity would take to get moving with an initiative such as this to use dynamic CRM for better managing donors and volunteers?
So usually I tend to favor an approach that I handle called STP, so situation, targets, and planning. First of all, the first thing I would do is trying to understand which parts of my process are taking the most of me when it comes to administrative work. Maybe I already have this amazing way of doing fundraising, and that's not where I need to focus. So what I would do is looking at and from a very practical perspective, whatever is frustrating me, okay, whatever's making me feel like, oh, this is so boring. I wish I could just hand this over to a machine, because that's what machines do great, the boring stuff. And after that, eventually get in touch with someone like us or like you, to have a better look at what the CRM or what pieces of the CRM work best with your process. It might be that something like the solution that I've shown here, and that's some other than the CRM itself, the solution, it's free, so you can just download that and install that into your CRM. I would say that might be a little bit more than user-land, let's say, work, but it's something that you can do as soon as you have a CRM license. But you can just start exploring. You can get in touch. I'm pretty sure that there's a way for us to be able to show you what CRM can do with more time than this, going over all the menus or all the entities and making sure that whatever currently exists is appropriate to your situation, and then just take it from there.
Yeah. So your recommendation is to kind of really work out what the biggest pain point is, start in that area, and then get some practical advice as to how you can actually configure the application to that.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay, that's brilliant. So in the presentation, you talked a bit about leads and customers. Could you kind of translate that a little bit into the charity world more for today's listeners? So
a lead, or just to clear on the terminology. So a lead is someone, or on the CRM for business, let's say, world, a lead is someone that you've potentially met, someone that might be interested in your products. You don't really know if he or she, whatever he or she wants, or if they just seemed interested in what you have to offer. The next step is to turn that into an opportunity. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. But there are steps that you can take. Let's say you meet someone at a social event, and someone, and maybe your organization is helping, and I'm always using this example, but it's the easy one, is helping homeless people, and you meet someone who says, oh, I really would like to help with that. You know, this kind of vague statement that would be a lead. Eventually, you might get to the point where the person says, well, I'm actually committed to help. I'm looking at the multiple options I have to help, or maybe multiple charities that I can donate, or that I can do volunteer work, and I really want to get involved. So that's kind of definition of opportunity. And finally, I know in the charity world, that's not the name of the thing, but in the business world, is you move into the sale itself, which is bringing the person to our side, and in the case of charities, to donate either their time or their money or whatever it is, and being a part of it. And tools like CRM, and I'm talking specifically about dynamic CRM because it's the one that I know better, actually have a way to help you and guide you through the whole process. What kind of data do you need to collect at each step of the way? Maybe what's the next action that you should do? It eventually even helps to start to characterize your opportunities and making sure that you're giving the right opportunity, the right attention, and giving it the right amount of effort.
Okay, good, thank you. And I think this is probably a question that will apply to a lot of people who haven't actually already got a CRM solution. Often they end up storing that information in things like spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So the question is, what are the steps for people to actually migrate that information, be it on spreadsheets, or maybe they might even have it on paper? You know, how should they migrate that into a new CRM solution?
So if you have them on paper, there's like always the first step of getting them into the digital world. When you can do that, if you're going to move from paper, you can potentially just do it straight into the CRM. If you have it on something like Excel spreadsheets, I know that Dynamics does, and I'm pretty sure other CRMs must do it too. They have ways to easily import Excel sheets. So you can just eventually customize the Excel sheet to match the CRM data model, or you can customize the CRM data model to match your Excel spreadsheet. And then usually and I'm not saying that's always the case, but usually the process involves you pressing a button, uploading the file, waiting for a couple of minutes to maybe a couple of hours if it's a huge amount of data, and just having your data on the CRM when you finish.
Okay, so this is a good question. So the concept of CRM is to get a single view of an individual. Yes.
Yes.
So
among other things, yes.
So the question here, which is kind of very relevant to that, if there's an individual who's maybe both volunteers, fundraisers, maybe donates, is a trustee, how does that sort of get handled in the system to actually see those different views of the same person?
So it all depends on the data model that you have. Okay, it can vary from maybe organization A to organization B. It varies from CRM from brand A to CRM from brand B. But what you'd have a record for the individual, and then you could associate a donor record and the volunteer record and the maybe beneficiary record, I don't know, some other characteristics to that individual. And usually, typically CRM allows you to get a whole view of, if you choose Mr. John Smith and he's a donor and a volunteer, you can potentially from John Smith jump into his volunteer record or jump into his donor record.
Yeah, good.
I would also say that, so one of the things that, and for a while at Microsoft, we were trying to brand CRM, which is customer relationship management, into something called the XRM. So X standing for whatever, relationship management. And what CRMs do really well is manage the relationship between the multiple things that they manage. Okay, it allows you to, or empowers you to understand how the relationship between a campaign and the amount of donations works, or how a campaign to get volunteers and the number of volunteers works. How does the fact that someone's a volunteer and also a donor relates to the activities that we develop? So in the CRM, it's pretty much all about relationships and knowing what's connected to what, and enabling us to leverage that knowledge to achieve more with the data we have.
Good. And I guess this is a bit of a simpler question. It's just relating to, I guess, more straightforward functionality. But is it possible to communicate directly from Dynamics 365, whether that be directly to your donors or volunteers or other groups that you want to?
So there are tools that allow you to eventually send email or eventually snail mail or whatever options you have. But there's also the possibility for you to, in the case of Dynamics specifically, there's something called portals that allows you to have access to some of the CRM's data, and you control what data people can access through the portals. The good news is, in the case of Dynamics, it doesn't involve additional licensing or whatever. It's a built-in feature that would allow you not to maybe reach out to your constituents and tell them you donated £1,000. Here's how we spent it. But you can actually give them a link, username and a password, and tell them, look, this is your access to our charity. You can go there and you can at any time check what we are doing with the donations that you kindly provided us. And that's the kind of thing that you can leverage.
So I guess the supplementary question to that is, and maybe this might depend on the volume that somebody's handling as well. You know, does this mean in effect somebody can replace their dedicated emailing system, or do you get to a point where you actually recommend that you integrate and use the two side by side?
So usually CRMs tightly integrate with your email. In the case of Dynamics, it integrates into either, I think, Google Exchange server or Outlook.com. I think it also integrates with Yahoo Mail. I'm not sure about this.
I'm kind of thinking about the bulk mailing systems here. So be it,
yes,
you know, like ours, TTmail, Mailer, MailChimp, those types of things.
Yes, it totally integrates to that. So the other thing it does is if you connect something like Dynamics CRM to your inbox, it can actually, if let's say I'm a donor and I sent you an email and I have a record in the CRM, it automatically relates that email that you got with my record and pulls it into the CRM. The same happens if you send me an email, it gets stored in the CRM along with my record.
Yeah. Okay, so moving along. This is a more generic question, actually. Somebody was asking, and I'm not sure which angle they were coming from, but they were saying, what is Dynamics 365? So I'm not sure whether they were asking what the 365 bit means or whether they want a broader explanation of what Dynamics is, because obviously Dynamics contains more than CRM at the end of the day, doesn't it?
So Microsoft really loves 365. We have Microsoft 365, Office 365, Dynamics 365. Dynamics 365 is let's call it the suite of applications, business-oriented applications. It has we don't call it like that, but it actually is the CRM. It has something that allows you to do financial management, which is also called Dynamics 365 for financial operations. And there's other Dynamics 365 products. In the sense that I'm talking about Dynamics 365 here, I'm talking about the CRM-ish bit of the suite, Dynamics 365.
Okay, and there was a question about integrating to like donation platforms. Is Dynamics 365 CRM able to do that? So
that Dynamics is 365 is an open platform. If you can, you will need potentially to write some code for that, but it's completely doable. So if it's an open platform, it has an API, you can get your data in and out of the CRM any way that you are willing to have it done. I don't think there's many pieces of data that you can't get inside the CRM other than system configuration properties. But other than that, it's completely open.
So I guess linked to that, this was a related question. Somebody was asking whether their Charities existing volunteer sign-up pages, which are actually hosted on their website, they're asking whether that could integrate into the CRM so that whenever maybe a new person signed up on that page, that would create a record in their or create or match to a record in their CRM system.
It's a completely easy to do operation. In some cases, you might even be able to get to use a feature like portals to get it done. But if you have your own system, you can integrate it with Dynamics easily.
Question which relates to licensing. Actually, we've had a couple of questions on licensing. So, is it possible to use Dynamics in its simplest form to develop a CRM for a charity at little or no cost?
I'm not sure about this that I'm about to tell you, and we will need to check this out later. But I do think that there are. So the Dynamics licensing model is a per user model. I'm not sure if there's a minimum amount of users that you need to have, but I know that the rules are slightly different for non-profit organizations. So I would defer that question to later. But I do think that it's not a really expensive thing to have.
Yeah. So I think we'll loop back round on that. But the other question was just kind of talking about the listeners finding the licensing options quite complicated. And I guess, there are different licensing models for different roles and things like that. So maybe putting on one side the kind of the not-for-profit element, can you just explain something about how that model works and how somebody will work out what would best work for them?
So typically what you do is you have a rough idea of the number of users that you need to use all the features of Dynamics CRM. And what you do is you get in touch with Microsoft, you say, I want a Dynamics 365 instance, and then you say, I want to have 50, 100, 1,000 users, and Microsoft will tell you, well, this is the price per license. I don't exactly know how much that is, but I know it's per user base. There are some things that come with your Dynamics CRM licensing that are not per user base. So if you have something like the portals, and that would be the feature that you'd use to keep your donors informed of how you're spending their donations or what activities you're developing at the moment, that doesn't have the user limitation. Okay, so you can give access to 1 million people, and that would still be covered in your original 25 Dynamic CRM user licenses, if that's the case.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks for that. And what we'll do subsequent to this call, we'll put some information online with the final published version of the webinar, which just kind of clarifies the position on not-for-profit licensing as well. So we will get that for all the listeners out there. We've got quite a lot more questions as well, so I want to keep moving.
There's enough time, so
moving through. So, question about updating. So how often is Dynamics as an application updated? So I didn't know this apparently. Apparently Salesforce is at least twice a year, and so is SAP. So how often are significant updates done?
I just had a look at that a couple of weeks back, and so Microsoft Dynamics 365 gets updated twice a year, spring and autumn. Those are major updates that tend to bring in new features or change things in the features that currently exist. But from a technical point of view, there's a new version of Dynamics every week. So if you have bugs, if you have, maybe there's this label on the form that somehow got misspelled or whatever, or maybe there's this bug that was identified, we release every week. There's a very technical document around all that and explaining how that happens. But if you're using the online editions, up to a point you can choose the moment that your instance gets updated or not. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe you're in the middle of a really huge campaign and it's not a very nice idea to have your CRM updated while you're doing the campaign. So there's a little window that you can say, well, between day X and day Y, I want to get it on day Z. But that's pretty much it. It happens twice a year. You can skip updates up to a point. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I will put the caveat that I'm not sure about this, but I think you can skip up to 2 updates before you ending up out of support.
Yeah. Okay, good. I've also been asked, so this isn't one we've planted, how do you feel Dynamics compares to Salesforce?
I'm completely biased in favor of Dynamics.
I was just wondering whether there are any kind of key features that you'd be able to. This is an opportunity for you to plug, I guess.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not very familiar with Salesforce. I know it's a good product, but I'm a Dynamics person, and it's I don't know, kind of like choosing your own football team or whatever.
So. Before we were talking about some of the different licensing options, would you say a charity is generally better off using the sales or the service version, or does it depend on what they're trying to do?
I would say they should use the not-for-profit accelerator, but that would be the customer, the sales edition. The field services is more oriented at stuff like, let's say that you run I don't know, maybe a repair company, and you need to be able to tell team A to be on number 10 Downing Street in like 5 minutes, and you need to make sure that they have the right car and the right tools and the right people inside to efficiently deliver the service. And that's a little bit of what field service cares about. I do know that this, when we were preparing for this webinar, there was a little discussion about whether we should talk about field service or for sales, but the fundraising bit is clearly more sales related than the field service. I'm not sure if they don't have, and I'm not sure about this, they might have different licensing models.
Okay, and drilling specifically now into the campaign section of Dynamics CRM, how would you use it most effectively? Should it focus only on fundraising or any other marketing campaign?
Oh, that's a good question. It doesn't need to be just for fundraising. I mean, it could be for volunteer recruitment, if that applies. A campaign is just pretty much a set of, or in the context of CRM, a campaign is just a set of actions that you take to get something in return from your audience. So in that sense, if getting a new volunteer matches with the business concept of a sale, then a campaign is also adequate for that. The other thing that you can do is that eventually, and I don't know if this is a thing, eventually you're trying to locate more people that you can help. Mm-hmm. And you can also use a campaign to increase your beneficiary base, if that's the thing. I'm pretty sure that charities don't have a hard time finding people in need, but if they have very specific needs, a campaign, I don't know, I'm thinking about some of the charities that might support situations that don't occur to the mainstream population. Maybe some, it comes to mind that there's a Portuguese charity that helps people with very rare diseases. So they do need to make themselves aware, they need to let people who have those diseases to be aware that this charity helps or can help them. So that's also one thing that you can use the campaigns for.
Yeah, yeah. Good. So if someone's, I guess, trying to increase their level of detail skills in Dynamics CRM, are there free training guides or videos that they can use to help them get up to speed more quickly? And if they're not, I guess, are there kind of cost-effective ones that you know of?
So I would say you can probably get loads of training from stuff like Microsoft Virtual Academy, or even that, I don't want to sound dismissive about this, but in some free sense, there are loads and loads of YouTube tutorials. It's a hugely popular product that you can find help with really easily. If you want a more structured approach, and if you want some kind of classroom training, or even if it's not classroom, but you want a more structured approach, there's always resources like Pluralsight, LinkedIn Learning, and I'm pretty sure there are partners who are able to provide that training service. I can tell you from my personal perspective, I learned most of what I know about Dynamics with coworkers when I was starting to do Dynamics, and just using Bing or Google or whatever search engine was available at the time.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, unfortunately, we're out of time for questions. So what we will actually do is we'll wrap up this webinar and we will actually record the remaining questions and the answers to those questions and put them with the recording online, which, as I said before, will be published within a week. I'd like to thank Pedro very much for his time today, and Harry. I thought it was a fascinating session, and we had some quite challenging questions there, actually. So thank you very much for getting to grips with those as well. Harry's already talked about the next webinar on Tuesday, the 30th of March. As Charity Digital News, we'll actually be carrying our webinar series well beyond that as well. So in May, we'll be resuming the rest of our programme, which is with the National Cybersecurity Centre. They've done a couple of sessions with us before, but in this next session, they're going to be talking about how you can use a risk management approach to actually managing your cybersecurity, which enables you to maybe focus your approach on, what are the main risks to your charities and how do you then approach those. You sign up for those through our webinar page as usual. So it's mentioned on this last slide, charitydigitalnews.co.uk webinars. And if you want to sign up for our whole series, there's also a tech-trust.org/29 webinar series URL as well. So that's all I want to say for today. Thank you very much for your time and joining us, and hope you get to join us again in the near future. Goodbye. Hello, welcome back. This is the bonus questions section of the CRM, Managing Donor and Volunteer Information session. And I'm here with Pedro again. We have more questions than we could actually cover in the time we had, so I'm going to quickly pick up those that we had to skip in the live session. So cutting to the chase straight away. Interesting question here, which really relates to marketing platforms actually. So does Dynamics aim to compete directly with marketing platforms like Marketo, for example, or are they really complementary solutions to each other?
I would say they are complementary and not necessarily competing. There are different use cases for each of the solutions. My view on Dynamics, so I don't view Dynamics as a CRM only solution. I'm still stuck to the old XRM and relationship management idea of it. But what I see on Dynamics is something that helps you to manage your whole process, other than the financial bits, which is a completely different solution. But it does help you to manage your whole process from getting people engaged with you to the point where you're actually bringing them in and turning them into customers, donors, whatever you want that's engaged with your organization.
Yeah. Okay. And is there an app store for plugins and extensions?
Yes. There's a vibrant ecosystem. I actually installed this. The demonstration I did was something that I went to the App Store and I pressed install. It took me roughly, I think, maybe an hour and a half to get everything done because it's a huge amount of data that needs to get loaded into the CRM. But usually it's as simple as pressing a button and accepting a few terms and conditions, selecting where do you want to install that solution, and it just gets deployed into your Dynamics instance. Or you can do it the manual way. In some cases you can. In the case of the not-for-profit accelerator, you can either do it through the App Store, or you can download the whole solution and then go manually into the specific place on the CRM and upload it.
Okay, good. And we talked in the live webinar about the not-for-profit accelerator. Can you explain to people how they can actually access this?
Yes. So what I can do, and because I'm not very good at giving away URLs, I can post it or I can send it to you later, but it's microsoft.com/en-us/nonprofits/dynamics-365.
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant. Good.
And the other option that
you
also have, if you want to take a look at how things look like, then you can get from one to the other, but it's quite a convoluted way. So if you can always get a demo instance of Dynamics CRM. It's something that you can get. You can go through the App Store and then install this. Or if you want to get into the nitty-gritty details and more developer-focused utilization, you can go to a place called GitHub, download the solution, and upload it through the other way. Go into system customizations, and you should be able to upload the solution there.
Okay, good. And on the again on the live recording, we touched on the area of integration with other solutions. Can you explain what APIs are available for connecting to other systems? And I'm specifically being asked about finance systems. I think on another question somebody asked about graphing as well, and constant contacts mentioned as well. So it's quite a few different areas of APIs people are interested in.
So you can, the thing with Dynamics is that you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. Okay, so you can get notified every time someone creates a record, updates a record, accesses a record, deletes a record. You have the information of what was changed, what was deleted, what was created, and then you can implement your own processes to either get that data out of the CRM and just into any other system that you have. Maybe someone just made a donation and you registered it here, and you register it's, I don't know, £1,000. And if you want to tie that into your financial system and your financial system allows it, you can have some kind of flow that takes data from here into your financial system. So the bit that gets the data from here to your system is sorted by the CRM. The other bit about your financial, I have no idea. It depends on what you have. And the same is true on the other way around. So you can have something happen on your financial system. And if that system publishes the event or is able to call a webhook or trigger some kind of web call, they can send the information into the CRM bank. The other thing that you can have, you can have it in things like maybe your dashboards or your charts. You can have a web page to be loaded, so you can potentially, and that the web page in a very specific way, and you will need developer skills for that. Can take advantage of the data that's being presented to you and eventually make a chart in a very different way. There's a huge set of built-in charts that you can leverage. You can also leverage something like Power BI to get even more information or different ways of seeing information and leveraging powerful visualizations to see it. But you can do it any way you want. There's also another thing, and that kind of depends on the other system that you have. We have something on the case of Dynamics. There's something called a virtual entity, and that means that if let's say your financial system allows you to have, and I'm sorry for the technicality, a REST endpoint that you can leverage, where you can, let's say, get a view of your last 10 operations or 1,000 operations or whatever. You can map that information straight into a virtual entity in Dynamics 365. So data isn't brought from your system here. Every time you view the table, it refreshes the data from that other system. But for everything else, it just behaves like a regular entity. So you can use it for charts, for graphics, for I don't know, maybe relating that to some other entity and just making sure that all those bits of information stay connected and related in a relevant way.
Yes. Okay, good. Kind of related, but coming from a slightly different perspective. We've got a charity here who's got a CRM solution which they're using to manage donors, which they're actually pretty happy with. So they're considering using 365, Dynamics 365, to manage their volunteers. Would it be possible to sync those between themselves, and would you recommend that as well as an approach? Because there's obviously implications in terms of data duplication and things like that.
I would say it really depends on what they have. But as a general rule, I would say use one or the other. Otherwise, you'll end up duplicating data, and every time something new comes up, you need to go into two systems to get the data. Or alternatively, you need to bring someone in that can make sure that there's an integration working between these two systems.
And then you have to also decide which one's the master, or is it two
yes,
thing?
That's
so it
actually,
can get quite complex. Yeah,
that's actually a huge problem for some of our customers, because what people tend to call the golden source of data is not properly defined. And because it's not properly defined, if someone changes something on the CRM, does that change get moved into system A, B, or C? What's the authoritative source of data, source of truth? Okay, and that if you have more than one system doing the same thing, that might lead to those kinds of conflicts. Not to mention stuff like GDPR, and something that I think I mentioned really quickly. If someone has to be removed from your records, you have to be able to do it. And if you have it in two systems, you need to keep in the back of your mind that you need to go in both and delete that record. If you have it in 10 systems, then you need to go into 10 systems and figure that out. Unless you have integration, in that case, maybe you can get away with just deleting in one and making sure it propagates.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't recommend keeping both.
Okay. So another charity question here. So they'd like to know, would Dynamics CRM allow them to create donors, and these might be individuals, businesses, groups, or a school, and log all communications with that supporter, as well as provide visibility on pledges, financials, volunteering information, gift aid if that's appropriate as well. Could it do all of those things?
I would say that's exactly what something like a CRM excels. Of you knowing how you relate to external entities and how they eventually might relate amongst themselves. But specifically on the case of tracking your whole activity, you out of the box, you might get something like tracking your emails and making sure which communications went in and out, which campaigns affected or were targeted that eventual donor or volunteer or whatever. Up to a point, I think you can also have, and I think that's a different package, but in generic terms, you can also integrate that in something like a call center and tracks out of the box without human intervention all your phone calls.
Yeah.
If you're talking about human intervention, then the limit is how much are you willing to spend just recording that you picked up a phone or you sent an email, or if you're willing to do that, then yeah, by all means. I don't think there's much limitation on that. Those are all fall into something called the category called activities, and you can relate them to pretty much everything.
So I guess I'm in a related situation. One of the questions also pointed out was some of the larger charities may be quite complex in terms of the way they interact, you know, and they might sell memberships, sell tickets to events, have some products they sell, do fundraising, donations, you know, so lots of different kind of transactions and interactions. Could Dynamics 365 handle those different use cases rather than somebody maybe going, I've got to get a dedicated ticketing system, I've got to get a donation system, you know, having to assemble those separately?
So I would say you can manage that all through Dynamics. Maybe the ticketing system, you can get a better ticketing platform specifically because, I don't know, maybe you need to print the tickets and that might not be something that's easy to, it will involve you customizing CRM beyond the point where a regular user can do it. You will need to get a software developer to do it for you, unless you want to become a software developer. But if you don't, you will need to get someone to do that for you. So in that sense, maybe there are some aspects of ticketing that are better served with a ticketing application. But you can always leverage the integration between Dynamics and that ticketing application if the ticketing application allows it.
Good, thank you. And our very last question is there a UK charity sales desk? So before I hand to Harry, who's going to answer this, I'm going to say people can get in touch with Tech Trust if they've got any questions at all. We run a help desk. We obviously cover a broad range of donation volunteers, and you can call that up on 0207 324 3380, or you can email us at office@tech-trust.org. And Harry, what about if people want an answer direct from Microsoft?
So the simple answer to the question about the UK Microsoft help desk is no, just use the global one we highlighted before, which is mspnonprofit@microsoft.com. But as you mentioned, Jonathan, we would also recommend that anybody interested and wanting to know more would also go to the links you provided as well.
Okay, thank you. So that's the end of our supplementary questions. I hope if we didn't cover your question in the main session, we've managed to do that in this this follow-up. And I'd like to say thank you and goodbye now.